The other theory is that a diverse society on a college campus, for example, opens us up to different points of view. Well, in the United States and in Canada as well, the point of view, this illuminating point of view you're likely to get from students of color, is very much what Professor March, without being a person of color himself, has told us. This same litany of persecution, of oppression, chip on the shoulder. If you really wanted a diverse set of opinions from a college campus, you might try admitting an Afrikaner from South Africa. You might try admitting fundamentalist Christians, or race realists such as myself, or just a plain old conservative. Then you might get some dissent from the prevailing, mind-numbing orthodoxy of racial diversity. Once again, let me repeat, we have not heard one word from Professor March telling us what the advantages of it are, this racial diversity. He says, we want it, and somehow, if we can get it to work, it'll be so beautiful. Well, I'm hoping that in his next 10 minutes he will tell me where it has been gotten to work. Now, he spent a lot of time, as I said, in high dudgeon, telling us what wicked white people have done century after century. I'm not here to apportion blame. I do not claim that whites are sinless, nor would I take the view which he seems to take, that whites are somehow uniquely evil. Isn't that the impression you got from what you just heard? These wicked white people, look at what they've done, time after time, century after century, uniquely evil somehow. I'm saying that human beings are tribal. They have a natural preference for people like themselves. That is normal, it is healthy. Why build a society on the assumption that this must be overcome? Before it launched into its program of multiculturalism and multiracialism, Canada was an overwhelmingly white country. Why subject Canada to an unnecessary experiment? Why pose difficulties that may not be solvable to a people? The Canadian people never voted on this. They never said, oh, why, yes, I grew up in Canada, but I'd like to grow old in Haiti. I grew up in Canada, but I'd like my children to live in an outpost of China. They never said that. And they never would if given a chance. The overwhelming majority of Canadians, in fact, say we've had enough immigration. But no, they are to be made to live in this because of people like Professor March, who say it's got to be done. This is your destiny, and we've got to make it work. We're all going to be feeding on each other's differences. Well, I don't think that Canadians have somehow managed to suspend the laws of human nature. Human nature is the same everywhere. People are tribal. We can like it, we can not like it. But I believe that a society should be built on an assumption of reality, on an acceptance of the facts as they are, rather than as Professor March might wish they could be. It is folly to build a nation on the assumption that race can be made not to matter. No nation has achieved this. All the nations that are attempting it are failing. And so, Canadians and Americans alike, I urge you to rethink this notion that somehow this wonderful kumbaya future of all of us holding hands, all of us brothers under the skin, please set aside this fantasy and build a nation for your children and grandchildren that reflects the reality of human nature and not the fantasy of idealists like my distinguished opponent.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Professor March, 10 minutes.
A lot of small points, but there are some very important ones to make. One is, of course, that the blacks that we have in Nova Scotia came up to us almost to a person escaping from the persecution of America, so that the reason we have trouble with the blacks, of course, is very, very similar to the reason they have trouble. We simply got the blacks that escaped from the racism in America and came to try and get a better life in the British Empire. We didn't do a very good job. I'm not pretending we did. The question here is whether if we did a better job, that would be a salutary thing. The heart of Jared's argument is the old-fashioned notion, mostly from the Roman Catholic Church, that there is such a thing as human nature. And he extends that notion that you've got to be realistic about human nature. And of course, when he says that, what he means is that it can't be changed. Now, in fact, human nature has changed enormously, because that's what human culture is all about. We can be many, many different kinds of people. We can create many, many different kinds of society. The genius of the human being is his or her ability to adapt with intelligence. We're an extraordinarily intelligent animal, and that gives us the ability to learn. And to learn means, among other things, to change your behavior, to change your attitudes, to change your values. So this whole dreadful idea that there is such a thing as human nature that puts an absolute limit on it is an ancient idea which in modern sociology and philosophy has been given the lie. There is not a static human nature in the sense that you should be able to extrapolate from that nature to the kind of society that you must have. In fact, modern anthropology shows that the same person placed in a society with varying values, varying techniques, varying systems of cohabitation, etc., can adjust to that. So human nature is flexible, it's plastic, and it's extremely important not to make the mistake of thinking that blacks have some areas in their nature that is somehow inflexible, that they can't learn, that they can't adjust, that they can't change. Another deep problem, I suppose, in his remarks is this notion that the blacks and Hispanics are into all this crime and the use of crack cocaine, etc., on account of their human nature. And the human nature, of course, different from the one that Jared has. And of course, Jared never uses crack cocaine and never commits crimes. But of course, we can find lots of white people who do crack cocaine, and we can ask ourselves, what is it that the Hispanics, the blacks, and the white people who use crack cocaine have in common? Well, golly, guess what it is? It's an addictive drug. And it's an addictive drug to significant numbers of people in every racial group that he would point to. Some may be more susceptible than others. I wouldn't be distressed by discovering that. It may well be that the American Indian, for example, having grown up in societies where there was lots of fresh water, they never had to acclimatize to the production of alcohol so that they could have drinkable water, despite the fact of large conglomeration of people, and so they never adapted to the use of alcohol, and we discover in them a weakness for alcohol. Again, can they be made to adapt? Yes. Lots of people have managed to overcome the tendency to become addicted, if one is Indian, to alcoholic beverages. The fundamental notion we're arguing about tonight doesn't need to go into scientific details of the truth. If you understand the notion of human nature itself is an ancient and pernicious concept, and replace it with a modern concept, which is an anthropological concept of the extreme adaptability of human beings, then you realize that all of Jared's fiddling with the details of the natures of the Hispanics or the blacks or whatever is in fact a self-apology. It's a system of blaming them for troubles which are the problems of the American society. Now, what would be the advantage to the United States if they had a racially diverse society instead of a variety of different societies trying to get along, and where they rub on the edges, thieving from each other, shooting each other, being contemptuous of each other, etc. The advantage of a truly racially diverse society in America would be that these people would live together, that the Americans would see to the proper education of everyone, whatever their color, and that Americans could walk safely through each other's neighborhoods. Is such a thing an advantage? Is it an advantage to be free from crime? A racially diverse society would be an America where the blacks and the whites did not impose burdens of violence, burdens of stolen property on each other. You would see them living together peacefully and happily. Jared is mystified. How could that be a benefit? I mean, on the one hand, he wants to list off all all the terrible things that follow from racial diversity? And my answer is nirvana, Jared, for you would be not having these problems. You would then have a racially diverse society in the real sense. A society is not a group of people living apart. A society is a single entity where all the different kinds of people are respected and treated equally and properly, not something which you can boast of. And my complaint, of course, is that when he looks across Canada and listens to all these people complaining about the problem of racial discrimination, which is still real in Canada, without any doubt,